Have you ever sat at the back of your own child's wedding and realized you were the only one in the room who wasn't sure if you belonged there? Have you ever watched your son, your baby, the one you raised alone, stand at the altar in a suit you could never have afforded, next to a woman who barely looks at you, and felt this cold question creep into your chest? Am I an honored guest or an embarrassment they're hoping won't show up in the photos? I used to imagine my son's wedding as my reward. You know what I mean? All those years of double shifts, scrubbing other people's floors, saying no to myself so I could say yes to him. I pictured sitting in the front row, maybe with a pretty dress I'd saved up for, tissues in my hand, watching him smile and thinking, we made it. I did not picture what actually happened. The room was beautiful. White chairs, flowers that probably cost more than my monthly grocery budget, soft music playing. Her family was there in their perfectly coordinated outfits, her mother looking like she'd stepped out of a magazine. I stood near the back, clutching my little clutch bag like a life raft, wearing the best dress I owned, the one my sister had helped me pick so I wouldn't feel out of place. No one told me where to sit. My name wasn't on the fancy seating chart I'd watch guests crowd around. I told myself it was an oversight. Don't make a scene, just be happy for him. So, I smiled, nodded, sat in an empty chair off to the side. When he walked down the aisle, my heart almost burst. He looked so grown, so handsome, like some stranger I'd only seen in pictures. For a second, our eyes met. There was something there. Love? Nerves? Shame? I couldn't tell. But he looked away quickly, back to her. They did their vows. Everyone laughed in the right places, dabbed at their eyes at the others. I clapped with everyone else when the officiant pronounced them husband and wife. Then came the reception. People milled around with glasses of champagne. A photographer barked out instructions, grouping people into neat little sets. Bride's family here! Groom's party there! Every cluster seemed choreographed. Every smile matched. I hovered by the wall, waiting for my turn. Mother of the groom, the photographer finally called. For a beat, I felt a little flutter in my chest. That was supposed to be me. I stepped forward, smoothing my dress, clutching the small velvet box in my hand. Inside was my mother's ring, the one I'd always pictured giving to my son's wife on this day. A piece of our family, a quiet welcome. The bride's mouth tightened when she saw me. Her mother's eyes flicked up and down my outfit with that quick, polite judgment women like me know too well. My son shifted his weight from foot to foot. "Mom," he said under his breath as I approached, "what are you doing?" "The photographer called for me," I said, trying to keep my voice light, "and I wanted to give her this." I held up the box, hands shaking just a little. "It was Grandma's. I thought it might be nice if—" The bride cut me off with a small, forced laugh. "Oh, that's sweet," she said too loudly, "but we've already got everything sorted for jewelry today." "Maybe later then," I said quickly, heat rising in my face. I took a tiny step closer to my son to squeeze his hand like I used to when he was nervous before a school performance. I barely got my fingers around his before he pulled back. "Mom," he hissed again, glancing around. I followed his eyes. Her family was watching. His friends were watching. The planner was watching. Someone snickered. My son's jaw clenched. "Can you just give us some space?" he said, voice tight. "We talked about keeping things simple." "I'm not trying to make it complicated," I whispered. I'm your mother. I wanted a picture with you, that's all." He looked at the photographer, at the bride, at me. Panic flashed across his face, panic that this perfect image they'd all built might crack. And then, louder this time, so everyone could hear, he said it. "Leave, Mom. She doesn't want you here. You're making this awkward. Please just go." Have you ever had your whole life reduced to one public sentence? The room went quiet in the way rooms do when everyone is pretending they didn't hear exactly what they heard. Someone near the bar gasped. I saw a bridesmaid look down at her shoes. Her mother smirked just a little. My son's face was flushed, his eyes begging me not to make it worse. For a second, I thought about all the things I could say. I could have reminded him who bought his first suit, who sat on that estate porch shaking when the power almost got cut off, who kept that old house standing so he'd always have somewhere to come back to. I could have said, "If you're so ashamed of me, why'd you tell everyone you'll be moving into my estate next month?" I could have cried, thrown the ring at his feet, made the scene they were so sure I'd make. Instead, I felt something inside me go very, very still. "I see," I said quietly. I set the velvet box down on the nearest table. Then I turned around and walked out. No one stopped me. No one followed. I walked through the parking lot alone, the music from inside muffled by closed doors and thick walls. The dress I'd been so proud of suddenly felt like a costume. By the time I got back to the house, the one everyone called the estate when they talked about my son's future, I was numb. I sat on the front steps where he used to play with toy cars, where he'd cried when his father left, where I promised him this would always be home. Always felt like a long time ago. Have you ever realized, sitting in a house you broke yourself to keep, that your child loves the idea of what they'll inherit more than they love the person who kept it alive? I went to bed with my makeup still on and my heart in pieces. The next morning, my phone woke me. His name on the screen. For a split second, hope flared. I thought, maybe he's calling to apologize. Maybe he realized what he did. I answered, "Hello?" "Hey," he said, voice casual, a little hoarse like he'd been drinking and shouting all night. "Rough night, huh? Anyway, listen, we told everyone we'd do a little brunch and photos at the house today, and we want to start moving some of our things in. Can you have the estate keys ready? We'll be by around 2. If you don't feel up to seeing people, you can just leave them under the mat." No, "I'm sorry." No, "Are you okay?" Just straight to, "Give us access to the life you built." I looked around at the walls, at the photos, at the old lawyer's folder on the side table, my will peeking out. Yesterday, he told me I didn't belong in his new life. Today, he wanted the keys to mine. That was when something inside me stopped breaking and started hardening. Have you ever had a moment where you know, as the words are forming in your throat, that once you say them out loud, nothing will ever go back to the way it was? I pulled the phone away from my ear for a second, stared at his name on the screen, then put it back. "I heard you," I said. My voice sounded different, calm. "And I have 4 words for you." He laughed, like this was some joke, like I was about to say something cute and motherly. "Okay, Mom, what?" he said. I took a breath and let them come. The 4 words that would make sure he never forgot the day he chose my humiliation over my presence, and found out I could choose too. People see that picture, mother being told to leave her own son's wedding, and they think it came out of nowhere. He banned you, just like that. But things like that don't happen just like that. They grow like cracks in a wall you keep painting over. To everyone else, it probably looked like a fairy tale. My son, the first in our family to go to university, marrying into a good family, moving up in the world. To understand why he was able to look me in the eye and tell me to go, you have to understand the world we both came from and what that old house cost me to keep. I didn't grow up with much. My parents had that house long before I was born. They called it the place or the land, never the estate. But everyone in the family knew it as the one thing we owned that nobody could take on a whim. The roof leaked, the porch sagged, the pipes groaned every winter, but it was ours. No landlord banging on the door, no sudden, "We're selling the building, you have 30 days." When I had my son, that house became a vow. I held him in my arms on the same porch where my mother had rocked me and thought, "You will never have to wonder where you're sleeping next month. You will know this place like the back of your hand." I didn't plan on doing it alone. His father and I had all the usual young love dreams: fix up the house, build a deck, plant a garden, watch our boy play under the same trees I'd climbed as a child. Then reality came knocking in the form of bills he didn't want to pay and responsibilities he didn't want to shoulder. Late nights out turned into not coming home. Paychecks disappeared faster than they arrived. The last straw wasn't some dramatic explosion. It was me finding out for the third time that the money he'd promised for the power bill had gone to a sure thing investment that never materialized. "I can't build a life on excuses," I told him, standing in the living room with the shut-off notice in my hand and a baby on my hip. He shrugged, said, "You worry too much," and left. The power went off 3 days later. He never really came back. People ask why I didn't sell the house then. They say, "You could have started fresh." Fresh where? In some apartment with thin walls and neighbors changing every 6 months? In a place where my baby would have to memorize a new walk home from school every time the rent went up? No. That house was the only stable thing I'd ever had. If his father wanted to walk away from it, from us, that was his choice. Mine was to dig my heels in and make it work. So I dug. I took every shift I could find. Waitressing, cleaning, watching other people's kids while they went on date nights I couldn't afford. I learned to patch drywall from YouTube videos, to unclog drains with coat hangers, to stretch a pot of soup for 3 days. When things broke, I fixed them, or learned to live without them. When my son needed new shoes, I wore the same work flats until the soles were more hole than shoe. The house became my second, louder job. I painted its peeling corners after my son went to bed, sanded old wooden railings while he played in the yard, mowed the lawn at dawn before catching the bus. Every blister on my hand, every ache in my back, I told myself, this is for him. One day he'll see. And in some ways, he did. When he was little, he loved that house. He'd run from room to room, tiny feet pounding the same warped floorboards I'd slid across in sock races as a kid. He knew every hiding spot, behind the old wardrobe, under the stairs, in the bushes by the front porch where he'd crouch with his toy soldiers. "This is our castle, right, Mom?" I'd say, ruffling his hair. "That's right, our castle." Back then, estate was just a word the older relatives used when they were arguing over old wills at Thanksgiving. Your mother left the estate to you, they'd say to me, half jealous, half proud. You'd better take care of it. I nodded, thinking, I'll take care of it for him. As he got older, the house changed shape in his eyes. It stopped being a castle and started being this old place. He'd bring friends from school over, and I'd hear the whispers, it's big, but it's kind of old, huh? My parents' subdivision is nicer. I'd catch him apologizing for the creaky stairs, for the wallpaper I hadn't had time or money to strip yet. We're renovating soon, he'd say, casting a glance at me like a promise we both knew we couldn't cash yet. He was smart, my boy. Ambitious. He devoured books, aced tests, got into a good university on grades and grit. When that acceptance letter came, I cried in the kitchen over the same sink I'd scrubbed our dishes in since he was born. You did it, I told him. We did it, he corrected, eyes shining. I'm going to make you proud. I was already proud. I was also scared. College meant new people, new worlds, new ideas about what was enough. Every time he came home that first year, I could see the shift. New clothes, new posture, new words slipping into his sentences. That's so middle class, he'd say, wrinkling his nose at something on TV. We're not poor, Mom, he told me once, looking around the kitchen. We just have a lot of history. I laughed it off. History is what makes a house a home, I said. He didn't argue, but he didn't agree either. Then he met her. She was beautiful, no denying that. Polished in the way girls in magazines are polished. Hair that always looked fresh, nails that made a soft click-click on her glass phone screen. She came from what he called a good family, with the kind of ease around money I'd only ever seen from the other side of a restaurant table. They drove up to the house one holiday in their parents' car, her mother's jewelry catching the light as they shook my hand. What a charming property, her mother said, looking around. With a little work, it could be really stunning. I've been doing what I can, I said, wiping my hands on my apron. One project at a time. You've done wonders, she replied, in that way that meant she thought the wonders were few and far between. That was the first time I heard my son refer to the house as the estate in a way that made my stomach twist. Yeah, once we take over the estate, we're thinking of opening up this wall, maybe adding French doors. It has so much potential, he said to her parents when he thought I was out of earshot. Once we take over. I told myself not to take it personally. Kids talk, they imagine, they plan. Isn't that what I'd raised him for? To dream bigger than I'd been able to? But small things started to pile up after that. He'd correct the way I said certain words in front of them, laughing like it was cute. It's croissant, Mom, not crescent roll, he'd say, everyone chuckling. Her father would ask about my job, and I'd see my son tense, like he was bracing for impact. She manages a whole team at the store, he'd say quickly. She practically runs the place. Which was generous, considering I was a supervisor who had to fight for every dollar. But the way he said it, you'd think I owned a chain. At first, she was polite at family dinners, asked me for recipes, complimented the old photos on the wall. But over time, her questions shifted. So, what's your plan for the house? She asked one evening as we cleared plates. Will you stay here forever? That's the idea. I'll die in this kitchen if the Lord lets me." I tried to make it a joke. She smiled thinly. "And then?" she pressed. "I mean, have you and Daniel talked about what happens afterwards?" I glanced at my son. He avoided my eyes, suddenly very interested in stacking dishes. "He knows what's in my will," I said. "We'll sort it straight when the time comes." "It's just that," she continued, "we've been looking at a few places closer to the city, and the down payments are substantial, but if the estate is already in the family..." My chest tightened. There it was, not even married yet and already mentally moving into my kitchen. I smiled, the way women are trained to. "One step at a time," I said. Later, after they left, I pulled out the old folder from the lawyer. I'd made a simple will years ago when my son went off to college. Everything to him. The house, the land, what little savings I had. It felt like the last, perfect sacrifice. When I'm gone, at least he won't have to start from nothing, I'd thought. Now, staring at that line with his name next to sole beneficiary, I felt uneasy. Not because I didn't want him to have anything, but because for the first time I wondered if he saw me as part of that inheritance, or an obstacle between him and it. Wedding talk made it worse. When they got engaged, everyone assumed the estate would play a starring role. "You'll have the reception there, right?" relatives asked. "Such a beautiful backdrop." Her mother suggested engagement photos under those old trees, like they were props on a set. I nodded along, all the while feeling smaller and smaller in my own home. "Of course," I'd say, "whatever you need." That's what mothers do, right? We hand over everything. The house became less ours in their conversations and more theirs. Once we're in the house, we'll rip up these floors. Once we're in the house, we'll paint over this. Once we're in the house, always that phrase. I joke sometimes, "I'm still alive, you know. Don't paint over me just yet." They'd laugh, but there was always that glint in their eyes like the joke had a countdown timer on it. As the wedding planning ramped up, my role shrank. I expected to be in the thick of it, not calling shots, that was their day, but being included. Instead, I got updates the way distant relatives do, after decisions were made. "We booked the venue," he'd text with a photo of a glossy location I'd never heard of. "We did tastings today," she'd post all cutesy hashtags. No mention of me. When I asked if I should come to a dress fitting, a cake tasting, anything, I'd get, "Oh, it was last minute, Mom. Next time." Next time didn't come. One afternoon, I stopped by their apartment with a casserole, like some sitcom cliché, and caught them mid-conversation about seating charts. My son quickly folded the papers, but not before I saw. My name wasn't anywhere near family at the head table. I was tucked out on the margins, if I was there at all. "We were going to show you everything when it was finalized," he said, cheeks coloring. "Didn't want to overwhelm you." Overwhelm me? I'd kept a roof over our heads on 3 hours sleep and grocery store wages. There wasn't much the word overwhelm could throw at me anymore. But what do you do when the child you raised to reach higher starts seeing you as the thing they need to rise above? Do you pull them back down? Or do you stand there quietly and hope one day when they look back, they see the scaffolding you were? I chose quiet. I told myself it was for his happiness, that I'd rather feel left out than be accused of being that mom who makes everything about her. The closer we got to the wedding, the more I faded into the wallpaper of my own life. And all the while, that old will sat in the lawyer's folder, waiting. Waiting for a day I'd once imagined would be full of tears of joy, not the kind that burned with humiliation. I didn't know it yet, but that piece of paper was going to be the only thing still listening when my son opened his mouth at the reception and told me, loud enough for everyone to hear, that I didn't belong. And it was going to be the thing I reached for, the only bit of power I had left, when he called the very next morning, acting like nothing had happened, and said, "Have the estate keys ready." After the day I saw my name tucked out on the edge of that seating chart, the wedding stopped feeling like a celebration and started feeling like a test I kept failing. I kept telling myself I was being dramatic. He's busy. They have a million details. Don't take it personally. That's what decades of swallowing your feelings does. You become an expert at explaining away every little cut. But it got harder to ignore when the cuts turned into clear instructions. One evening he called, sounding rushed. "Hey, Mom, quick thing," he said, "about the wedding." My heart did its usual hopeful skip. Maybe this was it, the part where he'd ask me about readings or dances or something that made me feel like more than a prop. "We were thinking," he went on, "it might be better if you skip the rehearsal dinner." "Oh?" I tried to keep my voice neutral. "Why's that?" It's mostly her family and the bridal party," he said. "Very small. We don't want you to feel out of place." "Out of place? I'm your only parent," I said quietly. "There's no one else to rehearse with." He sighed. "Mom, don't start. It's not personal. We'll do something just us another time, okay?" Another time. The theme of this wedding. Another time for my feelings, another time for my presence. Not now. Not when the pictures would end up on Instagram. Then came the text about the dress. "Hey, can you send a pic of what you're thinking of wearing?" he wrote. "She wants to make sure you don't clash with her mom." I stared at my phone. I'd already bought a dress with my sister, a simple navy thing that made me feel like myself, but a little fancier. I sent a photo, heart thudding like I was a teenager asking permission. The reply took a while. "She says maybe something lighter," he finally wrote. "Her mom is wearing navy. Also nothing too loud. You know how you like Prince." I read it twice. Nothing too loud? Like my presence was loud? "Tell her I'll wear what makes me comfortable," I typed out. Then I deleted it. "I'll see what I can find," I sent instead. I dug through my closet and found an older dress, paler, plainer, less me, more acceptable. The next time I saw them, we were standing in my kitchen and they were measuring walls with their eyes. "Once we move in after the honeymoon, we can knock this wall out," he was saying, gesturing between the dining room and the kitchen. "Open concept, more light." "We?" I asked, half joking. "Last I checked, my name is still on the deed." He laughed. "You know what I mean, Mom. After you retire." "Retire?" I raised an eyebrow. "From living?" Her laugh was sharper. She said, "Don't be morbid. We just assumed you'd want something smaller, less upkeep." "Who said that?" I asked. "You're always complaining about the stairs and the yard," she said, flipping her hair back. "It just makes sense for us to take on the big house. You could get a nice little condo, no maintenance. Win-win." There it was again, their version of help. My life reduced to a problem for their Pinterest boards to solve. We can talk about that when the time comes, I said, putting a mug down a little harder than necessary. My son shot me a look. Don't start, he murmured. This is supposed to be a happy time. For who? I thought, but I let it go. For the 100th time. As the wedding got closer, I noticed the invitations stacked on my hall table. Fancy envelopes, gold lettering. Mine had arrived like everyone else's, addressed technically correct, but emotionally distant. MS, first name, last name. No mom. No with love from your son. I told myself that was just how formal things were done. Still, when I saw the invitation her family received framed on their mantle with a handwritten note to Mom and Dad, it stung. One Sunday before the wedding, he came over alone. He paced my living room, straightening pillows, glancing at the old family photos on the wall like they might offend someone. We need to talk about the wedding day itself, he said. My stomach dropped. Okay, I said. What do you need from me? You need to keep it low-key, he said. No crying all over me, no long speeches, just be there and be chill. Be there and be chill? That's all? And maybe don't invite the whole family from your side, he added quickly. Her parents have a limited head count. And he trailed off when he saw my face. My side? I asked. They're your family too. You know what I mean. They're loud. They drink. They'll make comments. Comments like what? Like about her family, about the money, about the house, he said. We just want everything to go smoothly. You mean quietly, I said. On your terms. He rubbed his face. Why do you always twist everything? He groaned. This is our day, Mom. I shouldn't have to worry about you being too much. Too much? Too loud? Too emotional? Too me? I've spent my whole life being not enough of everything. Not rich enough, not classy enough, not educated enough. Now, at my own wedding day, I'm too much? He didn't answer, just stared out the window, jaw tight, like he couldn't afford to let himself feel anything for too long. Please, he said finally, if you love me, just don't make this harder than it has to be. That sentence sat with me. If you love me, make yourself smaller. If you love me, disappear. I went home from that conversation and sat at the kitchen table with my lawyer's folder again, ran my fingers over my son's name next to beneficiary, thought about how eager they were to take on the house and how the word we slipped into every plan they made with my walls as their backdrop. I thought about every time he'd said, once we move in, like it was a date on the calendar instead of a vague someday. And I thought, not for the first time, what happens to me in all these plans? I had a quiet meeting with my lawyer. Nothing dramatic, just a small change that felt huge. We added clauses. We diversified beneficiaries. We made sure that if anything happened to me, the estate would go first to pay for my care, my comfort, my wishes. Only after that would anything flow elsewhere, and not necessarily to the son who treated me like a temporary inconvenience in the house he thought already belonged to him. I didn't tell him. Not then. I told myself it wasn't about punishment. It was about finally putting my own oxygen mask on first, financially speaking. "We can revisit this if things change," my lawyer said. "If your relationship improves, if he shows more respect." I nodded. In my head, I thought, or this might be the only time I stand up for myself, and I don't want to waste it. The week of the wedding, the tension was so thick, I could have cut it with one of my old kitchen knives. He barely answered my texts. When he did, it was short. "Yeah, busy. Don't worry about it." The night before, I ironed my dress alone, smoothed my hair, lined up my shoes. I rehearsed small things I might say. "You look handsome. I'm proud of you. Welcome to the family." I practiced not crying too hard. I checked the invitation twice to make sure the time and place hadn't magically changed without anyone telling me. On the morning of, my sister drove me to the venue. "You sure you want to do this?" she asked gently as we pulled up to the grand entrance. Waiters bustled in with trays. Guests in press suits and dresses floated past us like they belonged there. "He's my son," I said. "If I don't show up on his wedding day, what does that say about me?" She looked at me like she wanted to say, "What does this say about him?" But she pressed her lips together and just squeezed my hand. I walked into that building with my head high, even though my stomach felt like it was full of rocks. I told myself, whatever they think of you, you know who you are. You know what you've done for him. I tucked my will folder a little deeper into my bag, more out of habit than intent, and tried to make myself small enough to fit into the box they'd built for me, present but invisible. I had no idea that at the end of the day, they wouldn't just be trying to tuck me into the background. They'd be trying to push me out the door. And I had no idea that the little legal change I'd made in a quiet office a few weeks before was about to become my spine. When the very next morning my phone lit up with his name and the words, "Have the estate keys ready," like nothing at all had happened. I told myself, walking into that venue, that I was going to be invisible on purpose. No fuss, no tears, no big statements. Just sit where they put me, smile at the right times, and go home with whatever scraps of the day I was allowed to have. I thought if I stayed small enough, they wouldn't feel the need to push me any smaller. I was wrong. The ceremony itself was beautiful in that glassy magazine way. Soft music, white petals, the whole room holding its breath when she walked down the aisle. I watched my son's face more than hers, the way his eyes shone, the way his mouth trembled when he said his vows. For a few minutes, he was my little boy again, the one who used to promise me he'd buy me a big house one day, the one who clung to my leg on the first day of school. When he kissed her, everyone cheered. I clapped too. Whatever else was broken between us, I had truly wished him happiness. Then came the part nobody writes about in the programs, the in-between, the part where the photos start and the roles really show. We all moved to the reception area, tables set with more forks than I'd ever used for one meal, candles flickering, a huge floral arch set up for pictures. A coordinator with a clipboard started lining people up. Bride's family here, groom's party over there, parents of the bride, parents of the groom. I waited to hear my name. I didn't. They put her parents dead center between the couple, as expected. They grouped cousins and friends around them, laughing, fixing hair, adjusting ties. I hovered just out of frame, clutching that little velvet box with my mother's ring so tight my fingers ached. The photographer glanced at me once, then back at his shot list.
"We'll get everyone in," he said, like a brush-off. Nobody said, "Mother of the groom, front and center." Nobody reached for my hand. Finally, when the big group shots were done, people started drifting toward the bar. The coordinator turned to me. "Okay, we'll do a quick picture with Mom," she said, ticking a box. For half a second, relief washed over me. "Over here, please," she added, pointing not to the arch where the important pictures were being taken, but to the side, near a less ornate backdrop. "We're tight on time." My son stepped over, shoulders still squared for the camera. I walked toward him, nerves prickling under my skin. "Hey, handsome," I said softly, trying to keep my voice from shaking. You look wonderful." "Thanks, Mom," he said, out of the corner of his mouth, eyes already flicking back toward the main group. I reached into my bag and pulled out the velvet box. "I wanted to give you this. It was Grandma's ring. I thought maybe your wife could wear it on her right hand. Something old, something from our family. It would mean a lot to me." The bride's head snapped around when she heard the word ring. Her eyes zeroed in on the box, then on me. Her smile was tight. "Oh, that's, thoughtful. But my set matches. We picked it out together." "Of course," I said quickly. "I didn't mean instead, just in addition. For later." I took a small step closer, intending to press it into my son's hand like I'd imagined for months. He stepped back, just half an inch, but enough. Enough that my fingers closed on air. "Mom," he muttered, his voice low and sharp. "Not now." "It'll just take a second," I whispered. "I just wanted—" "We talked about this," he said, louder now. I could feel eyes turning toward us, curiosity sparking. "Talked about what?" I asked, genuinely confused. "About keeping things simple. About you not making it about you." The words landed like slaps. "I'm not making it about me," I said, my throat tight. "I'm your mother. I'm trying to give your wife a piece of our family. That's all." Her mother appeared at his elbow, like she was drawn by the scent of discomfort. "Is everything okay?" she asked, saccharine sweet. The bride shot me an apologetic look that didn't quite reach her eyes. "It's fine, Mom. We're just in a rush and there's a lot going on." "Exactly," my son said. "We don't have time for all this right now." All this. Me. My gestures. My feelings. I stood there, suddenly hyper-aware of everything about myself they'd ever hinted was wrong. The way my dress wasn't quite the right shade. The way my hair wasn't done by a professional. The way my accent curled around certain words. I saw her bridesmaids whispering. One of them made that face people make when they're embarrassed on your behalf. My son looked at them, then back at me, and something hardened in his expression. Fear, embarrassment, a desperate need to prove he wasn't that kid from the old house. And then he raised his voice. "Mom, please," he said, loud enough that the music and conversation dipped. "Just leave. She doesn't want you here right now. You're making it awkward. Go home." Time slowed. I could hear the caterer's tray clink against a glass in the distance. Someone near the bar hissed, "Oh my God," under their breath. My sister across the room started moving toward me, but it was like she was wading through honey. In that frozen second, 100 memories flashed in my head. Him as a little boy on the front steps of our house, knees scraped, holding up his arms for me to carry him. Me counting coins at the kitchen table to make his field trip money. The night I almost sold the house when the taxes came due, then took a third job instead because he cried when I mentioned moving. The quiet meeting with my lawyer, signing my name under a revised will, and thinking, if nothing else, this house is mine until I'm in the ground. And now my grown son, in front of all these strangers who'd become his real family, telling me to go. Have you ever felt yourself disappear in real time? I could have argued. I could have said, look at me when you say that, and then look at this ring and think about who made it possible for you to stand here. I could have turned to her and said, if he can do this to his mother, pay attention. But I didn't. I heard my mother's voice and my own mixed together. Don't give them the show they're expecting. I set the velvet box down on a nearby table, next to a centerpiece that probably cost more than my monthly light bill. I understand, I said. My voice didn't shake. I wish you both a long and happy marriage. And then I did what he asked. I walked out. No stomping, no sobbing. I walked past tables full of people who pretended to be checking their phones instead of watching me. I walked through the big decorated doors, past the valet stand, down the driveway until I reached the street where my sister's car was parked. Only when the venue was out of sight did I let myself lean against the hood and cry. In the car on the way home, my sister fumed. She said, "You should have told him off. You should have stayed. You're his mother." I wiped my face. I said, "He made his choice. In front of everyone." "So what are you going to do?" she asked. "About the house? About everything?" I didn't answer right away. I stared out the window as the city lights gave way to our quieter road, to the familiar turnoff that led to the house that had appeared in their plans so often it felt like they'd already moved in. When we pulled into the driveway, the porch light clicked on automatically, like it always did. My porch, my light, my home. I went inside alone. My sister offered to stay, but I told her I needed a minute with my own head. "Call me if you change your mind," she said, kissing my cheek. The house was too quiet. No music, no chatter, no clinking glasses. Just the tick of the old clock in the hallway and the faint hum of the refrigerator. I kicked off my shoes and walked through each room. The living room with its sagging couch, the kitchen with its chipped counters, the dining room where we'd celebrated every birthday. Upstairs, the room we'd already started calling the guest room in his presence, the one they'd planned to paint first when they moved in. Downstairs again, into the small office where I kept all my important papers. The will folder sat where I'd left it weeks before, after the quiet changes. It felt heavier now. I pulled it out, opened it on the desk. My name, his name, the lines we'd drawn between our futures. You don't want me in your new life, I thought, but you want this house in it. Something in me snapped, not loudly, but with the clean precision of a twig underfoot. Have you ever felt your spine arrive? I picked up the phone and dialed my lawyer's number. It was late, but I left a voicemail, my voice calm. "It's me," I said. "I want to talk about changing the will again, specifically the part about the house." I hung up and stared at the folder. It wasn't about revenge, not really. It was about finally recognizing that I'd spent decades building something with the idea that it would be a gift, and the person I'd planned to give it to had just shown me he saw me as packaging.
The turning point wasn't when my son told me to leave his wedding. It was when I came home, stood in the house I'd nearly broken myself to keep, and realized I didn't have to sign my dignity over with the deed. That night, I slept in my bed with my phone on the nightstand, knowing two things for sure. My son would call sooner or later, and this time, when he did, I wouldn't be the one pretending nothing had happened. The phone rang before my alarm ever had a chance. For a split second, that old reflex kicked in, the one that makes you scramble, thinking your kid must be in trouble if they're calling this early. Then I saw his name on the screen and remembered. The trouble had already happened. I let it buzz twice, steadying my breath, before I swiped to answer. "Hello?" "Hey," he said. No hesitation, no awkwardness, just that casual, I need something tone I knew too well. "Rough night, huh?" There was a little laugh at the back of it, like we were co-conspirators in some shared hangover. "I'm fine," I said. "What do you need?" He blew out a breath. "So, we told everyone we'd do a little post-wedding brunch and photos at the house today. Out on the lawn by the big tree. And we want to start moving some of our stuff in this week, get a jump before the honeymoon. Can you have the estate keys ready? We'll swing by around 2. If you don't feel up to seeing people, just leave them under the mat." Just like that. No, I'm sorry. No, are you okay? The words from the day before, "Leave, Mom, she doesn't want you here," were still hanging in my ears, and he was already on to the next scene. In his mind, I was a minor character who'd exited stage left on cue. The house was the real prize. I looked around my bedroom as he talked. The sunlight coming in through the same curtains I'd hung when he was 10. The dresser my father had built. The photo on my nightstand of him at 5, missing front teeth, holding a dandelion like it was a bouquet. Downstairs, the bones of the house creaked in their familiar way. This place had seen me through every version of myself. Daughter, wife, single mother, tired supervisor, woman figuring out who she was without anyone else's last name. To him right now, it was a backdrop. "Mom, you there?" he asked when I didn't answer right away. "I heard you," I said. My voice surprised me. It was calm. Not cold, not shaking, just steady. "Okay, great," he said, barreling on. "So yeah, we'll be there at 2. Just don't make it weird, okay? Yesterday was a lot. Let's just start fresh." Start fresh. As if you can tell your mother to leave her seat at your wedding and then hit a reset button less than 24 hours later, no questions asked, as long as the keys are waiting. I took a breath. Last night's voicemail to my lawyer echoed in my mind. She'd called back early, even before my son did. We'd spoken quietly while I stood at the kitchen sink, fingers tracing the worn edge of the counter. "What happened?" she asked when I told her I wanted to change things again. He asked me to leave his wedding, I'd said simply, in front of everyone, and then he called this place his future house. Not ours, just his. She hadn't gasped or judged. She'd just said, "You are under no obligation to leave your home or your assets to anyone who treats you like that. We can tighten the will further, but you don't need a document to say no to giving him keys today." So here we were. Him on one end of the line, already making logistical plans for photo shoots and moving days. Me on the other, standing in the house he thought was his by default, feeling something in me settle into place. "I have 4 words for you." He chuckled, like he thought I was about to crack a joke, slipped back into the easy banter. "Okay, Mom, let's hear it." "You won't inherit anything." 4 words. They landed between us with a soft, deadly thud. For a second, there was nothing. No breath, no background noise, just silence so complete I could hear my own heartbeat in my ears. Then he laughed. Not the happy laugh from the aisle yesterday. A sharp, disbelieving bark. "Very funny," he said. "Seriously, just leave the keys." "I'm not joking. I changed my will weeks ago. I called my lawyer again last night. The house is no longer guaranteed to you. Yesterday, you made it clear I don't fit in your new life. Today, I'm making it clear this house doesn't either." He sucked in a breath. "What are you talking about? You can't just... Mom, you can't be serious? Over what? Because I asked you to leave for 5 minutes so things wouldn't get awkward?" 5 minutes. He'd rewritten the scene already. "I didn't ask you quietly," I said. "You told me in front of her family, my family, God and everybody that I wasn't wanted there. You were more worried about how I looked standing next to you than about what I've done to get you to that altar. And now the first words out of your mouth to me are about keys." "I was under pressure," he snapped. "Everyone was watching. She was freaking out. You showed up trying to hand out old jewelry and do your dramatic thing." "My dramatic thing," I repeated slowly. "You mean be your mother?" He groaned, exasperated. "See, this is exactly what I mean. You always twist things to be the victim. This is my marriage we're talking about, my future. You can't punish me for wanting it to go well." "I'm not punishing you. I'm responding. You taught me something yesterday, whether you meant to or not. You taught me that you're willing to remove me from your life in public to make other people comfortable. I'm teaching you today that I am willing to remove the assumption that my life's work automatically belongs in yours." "You're my only parent," he said, voice rising. "That house is supposed to be mine one day. That's how this works." "It's how you've told yourself it works. But no, it's not a law of nature. It's a choice I made before I knew who you'd be to me as a man. Choices can change." His tone turned incredulous. "So, because I made one mistake," I interrupted. "It wasn't one moment. It's been little moments for years. The way you correct how I talk in front of them, the way you roll your eyes when I mention my job, the way you talk about when we move into the house, like I'm a piece of furniture you're planning to sell. Yesterday was just the first time you stopped pretending you weren't ashamed of me." He was breathing hard now. "Do you hear yourself?" he demanded. "You're throwing away your relationship with your son over a seating arrangement and some hurt feelings? You always said you were keeping this place for me, that it was all for me." "I did keep it for you. For the boy who thought it was a castle. For the teenager who swore he'd take care of me one day. I nearly broke myself to put a roof over your head. That doesn't mean I have to hand over the keys to a man who sees me as a liability and this house as a prize." On the other end, I could hear muffled voices. Her, maybe, asking what was going on. A door closing. Then his voice again, lower. "What did the lawyer say?" he asked. "You'd really cut me out?
You think that's going to make you look good to anyone? There it was. Still all about appearances. Marrying into a new family doesn't give you the right to erase the old one, and treating me the way you did doesn't entitle you to my property. I've made arrangements so that this house will take care of me while I'm alive, and when I'm gone, it will help other people who see it as a blessing, not an embarrassment. You are not the center of that anymore. What does that mean? He demanded. It means you're not getting everything. I may get something one day if you show me you see me as more than an obstacle with a deed, but the idea that you can ban me from your big day and show up 24 hours later to start moving your boxes in, that's over. His breath hitched then, some of the anger bleeding into hurt. So you're just cutting me off? You're choosing money over your own son? The irony almost made me laugh. You chose your image over your mother. I'm choosing my dignity over being your doormat? The money? The house? Those are tools. I'm finally using them to protect myself instead of buying your approval. There was a long pause. Everyone's going to think you're heartless, he said quietly. An old lady with a big house and no one to leave it to. Is that what you want? I looked around at the worn floors, the patched up walls, the table where I'd signed my original will with tears in my eyes years ago. For the first time, the idea of this house not automatically passing to him didn't feel like a failure. It felt like a boundary. What I want, I said, is for you to understand that you can't treat people like props and then still expect their loyalty. If that makes me heartless in some people's eyes, so be it. Better heartless than spineless. So you won't give us the keys? He asked, one last attempt to yank the conversation back to his plan. No, I said simply. You and your wife are not moving in here. Not now. Not as long as you believe this house matters more than the person who kept it standing. His breath hitched, but he didn't respond to that. Fine, he said instead, all brittle pride. Enjoy your house. I will, I replied, and for the first time since I'd inherited it, I believed myself. When I hung the phone, my hand was shaking. I set the phone down on the kitchen table and stared at it, half expecting it to ring again instantly. It didn't. The house was so quiet I could hear the refrigerator kick on in the next room. I slid the will folder toward me, opened it, and traced my finger over my own name. For years, every decision I'd made about this place had been for him, for his comfort, his future, his imagined gratitude. Saying those 4 words, "You won't inherit anything," didn't magically erase those years, but it did something I hadn't known how to do until then. It put me back in the center of the life I'd built. He'd never forget hearing them. Neither would I.
News travels fast in families that don't call you for years until there's drama. By the afternoon, my phone started ringing again. Not with my son's name this time, but with cousins and aunt, even my older brother who'd barely set foot in this house since our mother's funeral. Word had gotten out that I'd cut Daniel out of the inheritance, which, of course, sounded much simpler and nastier when they said it that way. "How could you do that to him?" my aunt demanded before I'd even said hello. "He's your only child." I said, "He told me to leave his wedding, and his first call to me afterward was about the keys to this house. Not my feelings, not my safety on the road home. Keys." "He was under stress," she argued. "You know how weddings are. You're really going to throw away everything over a bad moment." I took a breath. "I'm not throwing anything away," I replied. "I'm just not handing him my life on a silver platter anymore and calling it love." Some called to agree with her, some called to gossip, but a few surprised me. My cousin Lisa, who'd always been the blunt one, said, "I was there. The way he talked to you, if my daughter ever did that to me, she'd be lucky I only changed a will. You held your tongue more than I would have." Even my brother, who usually stayed out of other people's business, sighed into the phone and said, "You know, Ma did the same thing. Left this place to you because you were the one who actually took care of her. Everybody else just assumed they'd get a piece. You did what she did. Took care of yourself for once." That night, I sat at the same kitchen table where I'd once balanced grocery lists and overdue notices, and now spread out something else. Possibilities. My lawyer had given me a thick envelope when we finally settled on the new plan. The house, first and foremost, would be used to support me while I was alive. Reverse mortgage options, rental income for part of it, whatever kept me from having to choose between heat and medicine in old age. Anything left after that would go where I said so. Some of it would go to a small scholarship fund I'd set up in my parents' names for kids from our side of town. Kids like my son had been, smart but short on opportunities. Some of it, if there was enough, would go to the community center that had kept him out of trouble as a teenager. A portion would go to my sister, who'd been my emergency contact more times than I could count. And him? He wasn't erased. I couldn't bring myself to do that completely, and I didn't want to. I left a conditional amount. Not the house, not everything, but something. Enough that if he ever grew into the man he promised he would be, there'd be a sign from me that I'd seen the work. If he kept treating me like a walking deed and not a person, well, then that money would sit there as a reminder of what might have been. For the first time, my will looked less like a love letter to one person and more like a reflection of my actual life. Days turned into weeks. I expected to see his car pull into the driveway any time, expected the sound of his key in the lock out of sheer habit, but the driveway stayed empty. The house stayed mine. I heard about him through other people. They'd moved into a small apartment closer to the city. "Just until we figure things out," he'd told my brother. Her parents had helped with the security deposit, but their generosity had limits even they wouldn't cross. "They thought you'd change your mind," my sister reported one afternoon, sitting at my table with a cup of tea. "That once you calmed down, you'd hand the keys over like always." "I am calm," I said. And it was true. The worst of the shaking had passed. What was left wasn't rage. It was a kind of clear, quiet. "Good," she said. "Stay that way." I started using the house again like it belonged to me. Before, I had been living in it like a long-term tenant waiting for the new owners to arrive. Now I walked through the rooms asking, what do I want here? I turned the formal dining room, unused since my parents' day, into a sewing and reading space. I invited a few women from church over on Saturdays to drink coffee and work on quilts for the shelter. I let the neighborhood kids play in the yard on hot days, their laughter bouncing off the old trees like it used to when my boy was small. I even rented out the upstairs guest room occasionally for traveling nurses who needed a cheap, quiet place for a week at a time. The extra money went towards repairs I'd been putting off for years because he might want to change it when it's his. Now it was mine to fix how I liked. New gutters. A fresh coat of paint on the porch. Nothing fancy, just solid. The first time I signed a contractor's form without thinking about what my son or his wife would say about the color, I realized how much space they'd been occupying in my head. Every so often, the phone would light up with his name. I never ignored it. I'm still his mother. But I chose when to answer. The conversations, when they happened, were stiff at first. "You really did it," he said, accusing threaded through the words. "You really changed everything." "No," I corrected gently. "You changed everything when you told me to leave your wedding. I just stopped pretending that didn't mean anything." Other times, he'd call about small things. "Do you still have that recipe for your sweet potato pie? What was that name of that plumber you used?" Sometimes he'd skirt around questions about the house. "Is the old tree still standing? You still doing all that yard work yourself?" I answered honestly, but I didn't take the bait. Yes, the tree is still there. Yes, I'm hiring help when I need it now. I'm not 25 anymore. Months after the wedding, he asked if he could come by. Not with his wife, just him. "I want to talk," he said, "about stuff that isn't paperwork." I said yes. He showed up without ringing the bell like he used to, hand halfway to the doorknob before he seemed to catch himself. He knocked instead. That small change, respecting the door, felt bigger than it looked. When I opened it, we both just stared for a second. He looked older, tired, not the shiny groom from the photos. "Hi," he said. "Hi," I replied. We sat on the porch, the same spot where I'd rocked him as a baby and cried the night after the wedding. "I've been thinking a lot," he started, staring at his hands, "about that day, about what you said after." "Me too," I said. He winced. "I was awful," he admitted, the words dragging out of him. "I was so focused on not looking like the kid from the old house that I treated you like you were some kind of problem, like you didn't fit the picture." I said nothing, letting the truth sit between us. "And then you said those 4 words. You won't inherit anything. I've never felt so slapped in my life." He gave a humorless chuckle. "Guess I deserve to know what that felt like." "It wasn't meant to hurt you for the sake of hurting you," I said slowly. "It was meant to wake you up to the fact that I'm not just furniture you rearrange in your life story. I'm a person, one who worked herself sick for this place and for you." He nodded. "I know. I started to know anyway. When we moved into that tiny apartment and the sink broke and there wasn't anyone swooping in with a fix, I thought, this is what she did alone. For years." Silence stretched. Birds chirped. Somewhere down the block a dog barked. The world kept turning. "I'm not asking you to put me back in the will," he said, suddenly, looking up. "I mean, of course I'd like to be in it, but that's not why I'm here. I just don't want the last real conversation we ever have be me asking you for keys." Something in my chest loosened a fraction. "I can't promise I'll change the papers back," I said. "Those are my safety net now. Apologies to your future plans." He shook his head. "They shouldn't have been my plans to begin with," he said. "That's the part I didn't get. I'd been walking around like I already owned something you're still living in, like you were just keeping it warm for me." "You were. That's exactly what you were doing." He winced. "What I can promise," I added, "is that if you keep showing up like this, not for houses or money, but for me, we can build something new. Smaller maybe, but real." We sat there a while longer. He told me about work stress, about arguments with his wife over bills, over how real life didn't look like her Pinterest boards. I told him about the quilting group,
the guest room rentals, the way the house felt different now that I'd stopped living in it like I was already gone. When he left, he hugged me. Awkward at first, then tighter. He pulled back, eyes wet. "I'm sorry," he murmured into my shoulder. "For the wedding. For a lot." "I know," I said. "I'm sorry too, for all the ways I taught you my feelings came last." He pulled back, eyes wet. "We've both got things to work on," he said. "Yes."
I agreed. We do. Watching him walk down the path to his car that day, I knew two things. I wasn't going to hand him the keys to the house just because he'd had one good conversation, and I also wasn't going to slam the door on the chance that he might keep becoming someone worthy of more than my silence. The house behind me felt solid, not like a prize anymore, like a partner, a witness. He might never fully understand what it took for me to say those 4 words to him, but I understood something I'd never really let myself believe before. I had a right to decide where my love went and where my life went. They didn't have to be the same answer. For most of my life, I thought being a good mother meant making myself small so my son could grow big. I shrank in every room that made him uncomfortable, softened every story of my own struggle so he wouldn't feel guilty, turned this old house into a fortress for him and a waiting room for me. I told myself it was love. I see now that a part of it was fear. Fear that if I ever really said no, not like this, he would walk away and never look back. The day he told me to leave his wedding, I finally saw what I'd been refusing to admit. He'd already started walking away a long time ago. He just hadn't let go of the keys. We like to tell a pretty story about motherhood. You sacrifice, they succeed, and one day they turn around, see all you've done, and say, "Thank you," in some grand gesture. I built my whole fantasy of his wedding on that story. I thought that would be the day he'd stand up and say, "This is my mom. We're here because of her." Instead, he looked past me and said, "You're making this awkward. Go home." It hurt in a way I still don't fully have words for. But what hurt even more, in a quiet, different way, was the phone call the next morning. The one where he showed me exactly what he thought I was still good for. Not as a mother, as an owner, as a deed, as a shortcut to a lifestyle he wanted. No apology, no acknowledgement, just have the estate keys ready. That was my real wake-up call, more than his words at the reception. It made me ask a question I'd never dared put into words. If I died tomorrow and left him everything, what lesson would that teach him? That he could cut me out of his life in public and still cash in on my love in private? That there were no consequences for treating me like an embarrassment as long as he made it home in time for the reading of the will? That my dignity was cheaper than his comfort? I couldn't live with that. Not anymore. Changing my will didn't erase the diapers I changed, the fevers I sat up with, the years I scraped by so this house didn't go back to the bank. It didn't erase the pride I still feel when I remember him crossing that stage with his diploma. It just meant I finally understood that love and entitlement are not the same thing. He is my son. He is not my automatic heir. People have called me cold for saying those 4 words, "You won't inherit anything." They say, "How can you do that to your own blood?" But nobody asked how he could do what he did to the one person who never left. Nobody pulled him aside at that reception and said, "You can't talk to your mother like that, not after everything she's done." It's funny how often we're told to keep families together at all costs, as long as the cost is always paid by the same person. What I've learned is that you can draw a line without stopping loving someone. You can say, "You don't get to humiliate me," and then expect my house, my money, my time as if nothing happened, and still hope they grow. Still leave a door cracked open for the version of them who might one day walk up your path with genuine remorse instead of an empty hand. That's the thing I wish someone had told me younger. Boundaries don't mean you've stopped being a mother. They mean you've stopped being everybody else's guarantee. If you're listening to this and you've spent years telling yourself it was all for them, the job you stayed in, the house you kept, the savings account you never touched for yourself, ask yourself another question. If they showed you tomorrow that they were ashamed of you, but hungry for what you have, what would you be teaching them by handing it all over anyway? I'm not saying every parent should march out and change their wills. I'm saying you have the right to ask, do they love me or do they love what they think they'll get from me? And if the answer scares you, you have the right to do something about it, even if that something makes people talk. My son may never forget the day I told him he wouldn't inherit everything. That's fine. I won't forget the day he told me, in so many words, that my presence was optional, but my house was not. Somewhere between those two moments is the line I finally drew. For me, for any grandchildren who might be watching someday, for that younger version of myself who thought her only value came from what she could hand over. I still hope in my heart that when he tells this story years from now, it won't just be, "My mom cut me out of her estate." I hope it will be, "My mom loved me enough to stop letting me treat her like an ATM and a backdrop. She made me see her as a person." Whether he ever gets there is up to him. What's up to me is this house, this life, and the knowledge that for once I chose not to disappear just to keep a spot in a photograph I was never really welcome in.